Yeah, I don't think anybody can really say that because I actually marvel at how much he's improved. You know, he's improved. He's been through trials and tribulation where he's been knocked down, where he's been called that he doesn't have no heart, where he's been said that, you know, he won't make it, but he's proved everybody wrong. Big fight. Terence, Bud Crawford brings a lot to the table. 38.
Boxing demands really intense moments of training, but the current training of Terence has drawn much attention, even Lewis. This camp isn't happening in a vacuum. It's building toward the biggest boxing event of the year on Saturday, September 13th at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. The main event streams live globally on Netflix with no pay-per-view barrier, which is part of why every sparring clip and whispered detail is under a brighter spotlight than usual. That scale alone explains why Lennox Lewis paying attention matters. He's a heavyweight great with a long memory for what wins fights on nights this massive.
405. 405.
Crawford's move up adds a layer of intrigue because training for power, timing, and durability at 168 is a different kind of grind than the welter and junior middleweight grooves he dominated. The convergence of stage, stakes, and schedule is what's feeding the conversation around this camp's crazy intensity. And at the center of that conversation is Lewis's respect for what he's seen and hearing about Crawford as the clock ticks toward fight night. The date, place, and platform are locked. September 13 at Allegiant, streaming on Netflix, and everything about this show signals a truly global moment.
Who's gonna win July 29th? Errol Spence, Terence Crawford.
Big fight. Terence, Bud Crawford brings a lot to the table. 38.
If you're wondering why Lennox Lewis's reaction carries weight, start with the resume. Former undisputed heavyweight champion, a technician who used balance, range, and jab discipline to master punchers and stylists alike. Lewis has always assessed fights by stripping them to first principles, then layering on nuance about tempo, distance, and ring craft. So when he talks about Terence Bud Crawford, he's not cheering from the bleachers. He's mapping paths to victory against elite opposition at unfamiliar sizes. In an interview carried by a reputable outlet, Lewis praised Crawford as a complete fighter, noting the mix of poise, power, speed, and movement that makes him so hard to solve. He likened Crawford's versatility to the fluid mastery you associate with a martial artist, a way of saying Bud's toolbox is deep and his timing is disciplined. That's the voice of a champion zeroing in on translatable skills, not hype. And that's why his take has rippled through a camp already drawing unusual attention.
8 wins, 38 knockouts. You would never expect him to be knocking out the people that he's been knocking out, but he does it in great fashion. You know, he's elusive.
Drill down on the specifics of that praise, and it gets even more interesting because Lewis wasn't tossing generic superlatives. He pointed to Crawford's all-terrain control, how he carries himself through exchanges with the same balance before, during, and after the punch. He emphasized the full package idea because the danger with size jumps is to chase power at the expense of layered offense, and he doesn't see Crawford falling into that trap. The way Lewis framed it, Bud's rhythm and shot selection create an elastic threat. He can score, reset, and walk you into a shot you didn't expect. That's the kind of read you only make if you've lived through the planning, the feinting, and the small edges that become big moments on fight night. Importantly, he also highlighted how rare it is to be a two-time undisputed champion and then go hunting for greatness again at a heavier, more dangerous weight. That admiration is part of why his reaction feels like more than casual applause for a star. It's acknowledgement that the skill stack he sees is robust enough to travel north.
He moves well. He doesn't get hit, and if he gets hit, he gets back at you.
Yep.
And then I look at Errol Spence, he's a martial artist too, and when I hear him talk...
Lewis didn't stop at compliments. He sketched the simplest, most brutal blueprint for leveling a size gap. Establish the jab, own the range, and force the bigger man to reset. Coming from him, use the jab isn't a cliche. It's a thesis about control that underwrote his entire career. His point is that a disciplined jab blunts momentum, interrupts combinations, and lets a smaller fighter dictate the geography of exchanges. Translate that to Crawford, and you understand the emphasis on first contact, on being first and last in sequences, and on refusing to let Canelo set his feet. If the jab is clean, the counters appear. If the counters appear, the combinations become safe. If the combinations are safe, the rounds tilt. This is how you make a big man fight small and a small man fight big at the same time. Lewis elevates that jab hierarchy as step 1, 2, and 3 for a reason. And it's why his technical red dovetails with what people call crazy about this camp. Heaps of jab reps, distance drills, and reset patterns that have to be automatic under stress.
Listen, I get a lot of texts asking how I'm doing, how camp is going, so I figured I could just put it up in one post. So I'm in the mountains. This dude's about to beat the brakes off Canelo and be the greatest boxer of all time, and I get to play a part in it. All is well, truly well. We good. I'm good. I'm real.
Then there's the training intel coming out around the edges, the kind that tells you how a camp is simulating fight night physics. Sean Porter, who's had eyes inside, talked about Crawford sparring big, heavy partners around the 200-pound mark and doing it with intention. Those rounds aren't just macho optics, they're resistance training for balance, clinch strength, and punch tolerance, carried out under boxing IQ and speed. Porter also made a point that most fans miss. Gaining functional weight is its own science, and Crawford's team isn't treating it like a simple calorie equation. That level of detail, adding mass without dulling reflexes, fits neatly with how Lewis evaluates the matchup, because those choices answer the "will he hold up" question before the first bell. In other words, the camp is trying to bank answers to the fight's hardest questions during sparring, not during live fire. For a technician like Lewis, that's a sign of strategic sanity, not madness. And it strengthens the idea that Bud's camp is crazy, only in the sense of being relentlessly purposeful.
You know, he's saying he's going to knock out Bud Crawford. A lot of people say they're going to knock out Bud Crawford, and he says that. So I know that his mindset, he just got in an...
Lewis also said the quiet part out loud about what it would mean if Crawford wins. "We've got to bow to him" is respect wrapped in a standard. That line carries more than admiration. It's a measuring stick for legacy, a marker that says beating a dominant super middleweight in his lane is a different kind of greatness. Coming from a man who unified the heavyweight division, that isn't flattery, it's a credential check. Lewis understands what it costs to go up in scale and deliver your A-game against a champion who is both naturally bigger and massively experienced under bright lights. He's not handing out passes. He's saying the road is there, but it requires pristine execution across 12 3-minute proofs. That's why his advice keeps returning to small, repeatable fundamentals rather than miracle shots. The surprise in his reaction isn't that Crawford is training hard. It's that the training he's hearing about marries ambition to the kind of fundamentals Lewis believes decide super fights.
An accident, and he got thrown from a car and he lived. So that, to me, that's a sign. A sign that he's bound for...
Another camp thread that raised eyebrows this week was the sparring with WBC lightweight champion Shakur Stevenson, a smaller fighter whose dimensions and rhythm can mimic some of Canelo's looks. On paper that sounds odd, lighter work when you're jumping 2 divisions, but in practice it sharpens reactions, entries, and exits against a slick, compact puncher. That's the art of mixing sparring partners, so you get both mass and speed problems solved before fight week. From a Lewis lens, this is pragmatism. Build the legs with big men, hone the eyes with live wire technicians. The footage and photos of those sessions only reinforced a picture of a camp stitching together complementary challenges. It's not simply heavy bangers and call it a day. It's pattern recognition under different pressures. And that comprehensive mix is exactly the sort of serious business approach an old-school champion respects when he hears about it. In short, the sparring menu tracks with the strategic menu Lewis keeps outlining.
Great things.
Spence Crawford is going to be a very, very tight fight. The one thing we can say is definitely watch it.
Yeah. Oh, fight of the century.
Layer that preparation over the stage being built around the fight, and you get why the scrutiny feels intense right now. This isn't just a fight card. It's a Netflix global broadcast in a football cathedral with the industry watching how streaming handles a mega boxing night. Even the officiating crew has been named and priced, which adds a formal, everything is set tone to the final month of camp. Veteran referee Thomas Taylor will be the third man, with Tim Cheatham, Max DeLuca, and Steve Weisfeld scoring, all approved by Nevada's commission. For fighters and coaches, clarity about officials helps calibrate risk and rhythm, how breaks are called, how clinches are managed, how pace is allowed to breathe. Lewis has lived through nights where those details tilted tides, so he knows why camps pay attention to that paperwork. None of this changes the punches, but it changes the shape around them, and pros feel that. The entire scaffolding screams, be ready for the biggest version of this sport.
Over Canelo. I got the reach over him. He might got the size, the power. I got the better skills, boxing skills.
Would it be more of a cat and mouse? The reality is Canelo does put people out from curve.
So how does Lewis's technical eye translate to this matchup when you line up the styles? He sees the danger in Canelo's compact power, patient counters, and body work against a smaller man, which is why control of the middle 3 feet of ring space matters so much. He also knows Crawford's switch-hitting footwork complicates angles in ways that frustrate reset-based fighters. The jab is the wedge that opens that door, and the counter left or right off the step is the payoff. If Bud seeds the center and backs straight, Canelo's timing will compress the ring and make the size difference feel bigger by the minute. If Bud owns first contact and turns the champion at the shoulders, that size edge turns into an inertia problem for Canelo instead. Lewis's version of stunned isn't about a single viral clip. It's about seeing a camp organize itself around those small truths. That's how a big night underdog becomes a big night problem.
Kirkland to Amir Khan to just...
Don't do
obviously, you talking about Amir Khan?
I'm just saying, man.
No, but he's not
Kovalev was...
Another piece of why Lewis's reaction resonates is that he recognizes the mental math fighters do when they dare to be great. He knows the training can't just be punishing. It has to be efficient, because fatigue is the shortcut to bad decisions. That's where the jab-first doctrine protects you, because it creates a low-risk, high-information exchange you can win round after round. You don't need to win the fight in 3 moments if you can erode it in 30. The gym translation is thousands of disciplined touches, not hundreds of wild bombs, which is exactly the vibe around this camp. What outsiders call crazy, old pros often call reps, and Lewis is very much in that second camp. He's not surprised by intensity, he's impressed by intention. And the more intention he hears about, the more seriously he takes Crawford's climb.
Older, and he does, don't get me wrong, he does have a lot of power. But all those guys that you name is not as skillful as me. I'm sorry. No disrespect to...
From there, the drill down becomes granular. Step jab to the chest to stop forward progress, jab upstairs to test head movement, feint step outs to make the bigger man reach, then pivot counters to punish front foot lunges. Teach the eyes to read shoulders, not gloves, because shoulders give you the beat a half-second early. Load the legs with medicine ball exchanges and partner resistance walks so your stance doesn't collapse in the 9th. Bake those habits until they survive exhaustion. Because exhaustion is where a great plan dies if it isn't automated. This is the mundane backbone of a monster camp, and it's exactly the lane a Lewis-approved approach would live in. When camp chatter says Crawford is logging rounds with bigger men, it tells you the staff is testing that backbone, not just his highlight reel. When you add a slick technician like Stevenson, you test the vision under speed. And when you fold in those jab-first imperatives, you link the whole thing to a clear, repeatable fight identity.
None of those fighters, the skill level is night and day.
So how do you see a fight with Canelo going?
A tough fight. Canelo is a great fighter. Like, I always had respect for Canelo, but I just believe in my skills. The fact...
There's also the age and wear question, and Lewis never hand-waves that away. He treats it as a design constraint you solve with camp structure. At 37, Crawford can't out-youth Canelo. He has to out-order him, which means fewer wasted moves and more productive rests in clinches and on exits. That's another reason the big man sparring matters. It teaches your frame to be comfortable at a heavier operating weight without panicking when you absorb a thudding shot. Porter's point about adding weight the right way fits perfectly here, because sloppy bulk is a bigger enemy than the opponent across from you. The better the weight gain, the less your jab and feet degrade in rounds 10 through 12 when fights at this level often swing. Lewis, who rebuilt himself after setbacks, understands how smart structure beats raw grind at this stage of a career. That's why crazy training isn't a red flag to him if it's coherent, and all signs point to coherence over chaos in Bud's camp.
Do you feel that Terence has a shot in beating Canelo Alvarez?
That's the million-dollar question. When I watched Terence Crawford get rattled and rocked by Yorkis Gamboa, who's a natural 30-pounder, that
Context helps too, because the night itself is unusually constructed. Netflix has published start time and viewing details that frame the evening like a global sports broadcast rather than a regional pay-per-view. That means tighter timing, bigger production, and a tempo that rewards fighters who manage their emotional peaks as carefully as their physical ones. Add a full undercard and free prelims ecosystem, and you get a fight week with constant stimulus. Lewis knows those environments can drain fighters who chase every commotion instead of staying locked to routines. That's why camps like this one build insulation, media blackout periods, tightly controlled sparring, and scheduled discipline. It's the only way to arrive fresh under the brightest lights Bud has ever seen. And the streaming model only makes those lights brighter for everyone watching.
to me, is going to be a huge problem when he gets hit by Canelo. So he fights at 175. He's fighting these big monsters. Yeah. He's not getting rattled at all.
We also can't ignore how official decisions around the ring shape the mood of a camp that's trying to tune its edges. With Tom Taylor assigned to referee and a trio of veteran judges on duty, there's a shared expectation about cadence and enforcement. Fighters and trainers study those tendencies because they inform micro-choices about pace, clinch usage, and foul margins. Lewis, who boxed through eras of different officiating styles, would be the first to tell you that you game plan for referees the way you game plan for opponents at this level. That doesn't mean you change your identity. It means you adapt your emphasis to squeeze every percentage point from the rule set. When an underdog is banking on clarity in the exchanges, those percentages matter. Crawford's camp can now calibrate exactly how clean must be to earn optics and rounds. That's part of why this final stretch of preparation feels so tightly wound.
It's going to be even better, so I think both of them come together and always have a good fight. And it's a great fight for the fans as well.
Is there like a...
Loop back to Lewis, and you realize his stunned tone comes from how aligned the pieces look, not from a single circus act in the gym. He sees a fighter daring past comfort, but doing it with habits that scale. Jab first, feet set, vision calm, decisions clean. He sees a camp testing the body against bulk and the brain against speed, an antidote to the most obvious risks. He sees the ambition calibrated to the craft in a way that gives the underdog a real foothold in a division where mistakes are punished differently. That's what a master notices when he surveys a training camp with legacy on the line. And it's why his respect sounds more like a game plan endorsement than a hype man's roar. It's measured, technical, and rooted in what he values most about championship boxing. On a night this big, that kind of approval is its own quiet forecast. And it's the kind of forecast that only deepens the intrigue around every minute left in the gym.
Second fight, they impressed me. So, it's kind of hot and cold. So I know there's going to be a third fight. It has to be a third fight. And I think that fight's going to be the best fight of them all because...
None of that turns Canelo into a puzzle without answers, but it does turn him into a puzzle you can pace. That's how a smaller man forces a bigger one to chase timing instead of space. And it's how judges start seeing clean work instead of catching only the loudest moments. Lewis's eyes are trained to reward that kind of work. And the more Camp Bud reflects it, the more plausible his bow to him threshold becomes. That threshold isn't based on rhetoric, it's based on solvable problems.
Because both of them will be going for it.
Is there any middleweights you'd like to see these guys kind of, once they're done with each other, is there a kind of a front runner for you at least?
Finally, every super fight needs a frame, and this one already has the trappings. A stadium, a global streamer, and an officiating crew that confirms the scale. Those formalities aren't fluff. They're the scaffolding that tells veterans the night will be orderly, televised to the corners of the globe, and remembered. Lewis's response sits neatly in that frame. He's acknowledging the magnitude while saluting the method.